Good evening. I hope I'm going to last 15 minutes, actually, because I just picked this dreaded London lurgy up today, and I'm kind of losing my voice, but bear with me. So maybe we have the first... oh, there it is. So this was the kind of optimism I had at the beginning of the shoot. I thought that in this journey to the heart of the evangelical heartland of Sarah Palin and Wasilla, which is where she grew up and received her evangelical education, that I would be pulled to her, well, not unattractive persona and bosom in Wasilla. And tonight I'm going to really talk about that trip, the trip of trying to meet the evangelicals and trying to make some sense of Sarah Palin and what she stood for. She's an incredible mixture of different things. I think initially incredibly welcoming and very charismatic, and she has that sort of fantastic, also almost kind of messianic look to her. She's incredible with crowds of 50,000 or 10,000, but I think the problems people said to me, who work with her, is when you're in a room with her and there's just one of you and trying to have a conversation with her, trying to really find out who the real Sarah Palin is. Because I think, like many evangelicals who are trying to live to these incredibly strict values, the only way of surviving it is to have many, many different Sarah Palins. And I think everybody wondered very much who the Sarah Palin was that they were going to meet on a particular day. But anyway, the way we approached this was to try and go very kind of hush-hush, under the radar, into Wasilla, so we wouldn't sort of be broadcasted before we even got there. And we named our production company Awakening Film, which we thought would have a good kind of evangelical feel to it. And I used my name, John Broomfield, which is what I have in my passport. And everything went very well until we got to Seattle Airport. And that's two of my crew members being taken away to the Homeland Security pound in Seattle. They had come on the wrong visas, and as soon as they heard the name Sarah Palin, they went through all our luggage, took all our contact sheets and everything, and the two of them were taken off, and I didn't see them for another couple of weeks, maybe the next. And you might wonder what this is. It's some kind of new waterboarding technique that they're doing in this detention center. In fact, I think it's some kind of medical examination they were very proud of. But Sarah, who was the researcher, was subjected to a pregnancy test against her consent, and they were both tested for venereal diseases and various other things. They were held in, and Mark was actually given a rectal examination, and they were held in isolation for 2 days and then sent back to England. So when I finally got to Wasilla, somewhat dejected, I discovered that the whole community, of course, knew about us because Homeland Security had gone through our contact sheet and phoned everybody up. So far from going under the radar, we couldn't have been better announced getting there. And the going was very hard, particularly actually finding somewhere to stay. We were going to be there for 3 months. We wanted to try and find a house. I assumed that no one in their right mind would be going to Alaska in the middle of the winter. But in fact, it was incredibly difficult because the two estate agents were great supporters of Sarah Palin and didn't want to rent us anything. But I think making these films is very much luck. Sometimes you just have luck and you make a phone call and somebody answers the phone at the right time. And we called Sarah Palin's parents up, and lo and behold, they were, come round and we'll do an interview with you. So we'll show this clip. This is Chuck and Sally Heath, Sarah Palin's parents, who were very welcoming and welcomed us into their house.
Hello.
I'm Sally.
Sally, Sarah's mother, is very active in the church.
Come on in.
Thank you so much. Shall I take my boots off?
Come right
Are
on.
you sure?
You can leave them up here in the house. We don't.
Eller. There you go, good boy. Good boy. Drop it. Oh, he's fun.
This is Chuck, special antler dog.
Eller. Eller. Good boy.
So
we have a lot of
yourself?
We have a lot of fun with him. Yeah, I work with him every day, yeah. He's young, he's only 9 months old.
So did you have any idea?
Oh, sure, we knew. There's three common questions asked of us. Number one, what's her game plan? What does she want to do? We don't know. Number two is, did we see this coming? No, not at all. We did notice, though, she was very competitive as a young girl, very competitive. She had a mind of her own, and if she thought something was right, boy, she just stayed with it, and she still does. But so competitive, whether it was sports or hunting or fishing or politics, very competitive. The third question asked of us quite frequently is, how has it changed our lives? Well, I answer that. I still drink the same cheap beer I drank 40 years ago, and I still run with the same derelicts I did 40 or 50 years ago.
So that was all very nice. We thought, wow, now we're going to be in with a family, and soon I'm going to be cuddling up to Sarah like that. And Sarah, however, was not in Wasilla very much. She was promoting her most recent book, which Rupert Murdoch was pushing through and doing very well, and she was going around the country. Rupert's company published the book and were putting a lot of money into it, and she was mainly promoting that, and also I think at that point, which was a year ago, very strongly thinking of running as the for the Republican nomination. So we put out various feelers for Sarah, but couldn't reach her, and in the end we decided what we should do is go to Houston, Texas, which is where she was doing a book signing, and ask her in person. We'd spent a lot of time talking to a lawyer and talking to Sarah Pack and so on, so I thought, well, we're going to ask Sarah herself. So this is us asking Sarah at the book signing.
Thank you so much. Hi there. What's your name? Nick, so nice to meet you. Appreciate you being here. Nice
Love your, yeah, I thought it might make you feel at home.
Yeah. Were you up there?
I was in Alaska, and I might go back and do a documentary. I was wondering if you could maybe ask some questions when I come down there.
Well, I'll bet you I can do that.
Could you do that? That'd
Yeah.
be fantastic.
Yeah, do you have a card or something you can
I
leave?
don't, but I'll leave
Anyone?
one here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, do that.
I'll contact you when I'm in Wasilla.
Okay, good.
All right.
Thank you. Can't miss Wasilla. Hi there. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Hi, right over here.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Sure.
Sarah seems so charming and friendly, so approachable and down to earth. I loved the way she said, I bet you I could do that. I could understand why people fell in love with her.
Enough of that. So it all seemed, fairly promising, but we were slowly getting pulled into this small town of Wasilla, which is only 5,000 people, and has 76 churches. And I think, like with a lot of small towns, you get in and you become pals with some people, but what you don't know is that certain people are not pals with other people, and you don't really know at that time who you should be talking to and who you shouldn't be talking to. And, coming from a fairly kind of open place like England, you talk to everybody. And our problem really started when we started talking to a woman called Colleen Cottle, whose family had actually founded Wasilla in the 1850s. There was gold mining there and that kind of thing. And she had been the deputy mayor with Sarah Palin when Sarah Palin was mayor. And she was actually 2 houses up from us where we finally managed to get a house, which incidentally, the other great thing that Wasilla is famous for is being the drugs capital of Alaska, and they make a great deal of meths there. And the other reason it's very hard to get houses there is because it's normally drug dealers who get the houses during the winter, and they boil up the drugs and then sell them around the rest of Alaska. And it oddly kind of fitted in with it being this very strict evangelical community, because I think it was so hard to live up to all the evangelical messages that there was, a lot of other problems just sort of under the carpet. There was massive drug taking, there was incredible child abuse, there was a very high suicide rate amongst young evangelical men who might be gay. So there were all those kinds of things. It was the longer we stayed in Wasilla, the more ominous it became. And then one day we met this dog that you're about to see. I think, doesn't it? Now this dog, who we kind of christened Knick, which was the local river, we found in the house next to us. The house next to us was empty, and it was minus 25 at night. And this rather sweet, rather plump dog was kind of whimpering, and we thought it was going to obviously freeze to death. So we adopted Knick. This was actually just after we gave it its first wash for a very long time. And Knick was very proud of the ribbon that the dog shampooing place had given him. But we were determined to try and find the neighbor or the person who owned this dog. So amongst other people, we went to see Colleen Cottle. And she said she didn't have it. She didn't know who the dog was. And then we went to see Chuck Heath, Sarah's dad, and we said, well, we found this dog. It was kind of more or less in Colleen Cottle's house. And he said, oh, so you know Colleen Cottle. And that was the sort of beginning of the end of our relationship, really, with the Heath Palins, all because of Knick. And as much as I said, well, we were just kind of doing the normal Christian thing of looking after this animal, which was going to freeze to death, he became more and more obsessed that we were best friends with Colleen Cottle and that we were now only interested in what Colleen Cottle had to say. And every time we went to see Chuck, he would ask us about Colleen Cottle. And he didn't really want to talk to us very much anymore. And the only way we could keep going to see Chuck was to buy more and more antlers from him, because he was a hunter and he collected a lot of these antlers, and his beer money was from selling these magnificent antlers. So by the time we actually left Wasilla, we had about 10 pairs of these gigantic antlers. But things then became quite, they just became difficult. We were obviously identified as the enemy, and we realized that this wasn't just us that had happened. This would be something that was just happening very, very often in Wasilla, and it was very hard not to become the enemy. And this had not only happened in Sarah Palin's career as mayor, where this little town had become completely polarized between evangelicals and non-evangelicals, but also when she was governor. And I think it was this kind of polarizing political position of Sarah Palin's that actually has become the thing I think that probably has characterized her politics more than anything else. But one of the people we met, who was almost enemy number one of Sarah Palin, was somebody called the Reverend Howard Bess. And Howard Bess had written this book called Pastor, I Am Gay, to try and deal with this big problem of the high suicide rate amongst evangelical boys, probably often around the age of 17 or 18, who were so worried that they might be gay, and they were terrified of talking to their parents about it, that there was a very high proportion of who had committed suicide, and Howard Bess was involved with them. And he'd written this very mild book, which was completely inoffensive, But it was one of Sarah Palin's first acts was to ban it from the Wasilla Public Library. And this then so polarized the community that the few gays that there were made a point of requesting the book, and then they were the evangelicals who were protesting outside the library. And suddenly this little town was almost in flames between those pro and against. And Howard Best received literally hundreds and hundreds of death threats. And when we first met him, he requested that we meet him in a restaurant somewhere because he didn't know who we were and he didn't want people to know where he was living. But I enormously admired his courage because I think there was at her peak, Sarah Palin had such a devoted following that to, you know, if she condemned you or if she came out against you, you know, you stood a good chance of getting your property smashed up and your car tires slashed and all that kind of thing. So I wanted you to see a little bit of Howard Best, who I thought was a fantastic.
Now, Darlene,
Oh, no, don't take a picture of me.
Darlene does not want people even to know where we live.
When it first started, I thought, you know, that someone might hear a message from God and come and shoot him. You know,
I wanted to make sure that I met you in a public place because I didn't know who you were.
Even today, there isn't a copy of Howard's book at the Wasilla Public Library. I asked what Sarah objected to.
My acceptance of gay people. She is still, you know, she's adamantly anti-gay rights. Frankly, I do not understand the depth of the hostility of conservative and fundamentalist churches toward gay people. Their devil for a long time was communism and the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, they lost their devil. And within a year, gay people had become their new devil.
But communism is on the rise, and Satan has a new disguise. Be careful of the commie lies, swallow them and freedom dies. The USA must realize that
she's a part of that thinking. Sarah must have an enemy. There's not a cooperative bone in her body. There's never any compromise. She lives in a black and white world, and there's one thing that you do with someone who is wrong, who opposes you, and that is you do them in, you get rid of them, you kill them off. Nice lady. Genuine smile. Pleasant to meet, charming.
But she'll kill you.
Oh, sure, she'd kill you like that.
And there were many, many more. I kind of asked myself, you know, where did all this come from? Where did this, the hatred and the polarizing and the kind of devil side come from? And I think Sarah's a, you know, complex character. I mean, her mother was very, very involved in the Assembly of God, which was kind of almost like a Masonic institution in Wasilla, and if you didn't support the Assembly of God, you would lose your job sort of in the coffee shop and that sort of thing. And it made people also very frightened to talk in this film. But also, I think her determination and that sort of steel came very much from her father, who also was the track coach in the local school. And maybe we could just have a shot of Chuck's feet. Now, this was Chuck's feet. When we were still getting on with him, he took us around the house, and I saw this shot of his feet, and I said, Chuck, what is this, you know? And he said, well, this is my feet after I ran a marathon run, and you know, sometimes when you're getting towards the end, if you've got badly fitted socks or your shoes don't fit, you get an enormous amount of pus that grows up in between the nail and the toe. And I always carry around a little hand drill with me in my pocket, and I drill through my toes, and well, the pus comes out, and then I finish the race. And I was almost sort of vomiting on the floor. I said, but and then I kind of realized that, you know, he was Sarah's coach, and he was the person who pushed her through the basketball, who pushed her to always excel. If you came in first, you never came in fast enough. There was another record that was better than your record. And so I'm getting signals here to wrap up, so I'm doing it very fast. I felt that it went very much to that kind of complete determination that, you know, that Sarah had this, you know, very charismatic exterior, this very she sucks kind of thing, but there was this totally uncompromising evangelical core. And the reason I keep going on about the evangelicals is because I think in the 2012 elections, the evangelicals are certainly the most organized group, certainly within the Republican Party, and are having a massive influence. And I think, obviously, we've worked very hard to keep church and state separated in this country, but I think what we're witnessing at the moment in America is something, you know, frightening and relatively new in its degree of organization. And I think, you know, Sarah Palin represents this, along with the Michelle Bachmans and Governor Perez, and is a cause for concern. But thank you very much indeed, and please support Amnesty, a fantastic organization.